Good morning. I'm Andrew Abbott, professor of sociology and chair of the task force on the university library. And I'd like to welcome all of you who've come to the Joseph Regenstein Library on this unexpectedly frigid morning. My colleagues on the task force and I hope that you'll find our program a mixture of old and new, of standard and controversial, of self-evident and perplexing. As you can see, we've planned a conference around the general theme of space and knowledge with a specific focus on the way knowledge is instantiated in university libraries. In the morning, we'll be focusing on Regenstein in particular, but in the afternoon, we'll take a more general view. Throughout the day, we hope to learn not only from various presentations, but also from the questions, comments, and challenges that we know you, the audience, will bring. So, again, welcome to the conference. I'd like to take a couple of minutes now to set the stage briefly by summarizing how we've arrived at this moment. I'll then introduce Judith Nadler, director of the library, who'll make some comments and tell us about some crucial housekeeping details. The road to this conference began several years ago when Martin Runkle, then director of the library, told Provost Richard Saller that given the present rate of acquisitions, Regenstein would be completely full in 2008. The provost appointed a task force, chaired by Richard Helmholtz of the law school, to consider the various ways of dealing with that issue. The Helmholtz task force met throughout the academic year 2003-04 and considered a wide variety of options: on-site and off-site, high technology, low technology, fully browsable, compact, high density. Predictably, the options ranged from the mildly expensive to the extremely expensive, and opinions ran high on the research utility and disutility of off-site location, high-density storage, and so on. The debate raged on into the fall of 2004, when a number of factors lined up to produce a compromise solution acceptable to most major stakeholders. This compromise was a low-technology but high-density storage facility on-site, populated entirely with specific kinds of materials. The facility would house things like special collections materials that were already unbrowsable, serials available electronically elsewhere, extremely low-use serials collections, and so on. Since serials tend to remain the same size for long periods, we could realize intense space savings without disordering the collection. Long runs would be pageable with a single slip. Moreover, on-site location meant paging would take minutes, not the 24 hours suffered by most of our colleagues elsewhere. Low technology guaranteed the reliability and durability that high-tech options sometimes lack. Best of all, although the facility would eventually house 3.5 million volumes, the entire monograph collection would remain outside it and fully browsable. The trustees agreed to build this facility last May, and the architect selection process is nearing completion. Questions raised during the discussion and planning of this facility, however, persuaded the provost that it would be wise to appoint yet another task force to consider the current situation of the university libraries as a whole. The faculty members of this group, which I have the privilege to chair, were Professor James Chandler of the English Department, Professor Martin Feeder of the Department of Organismal Biology and Anatomy, Professor Neil Harris of the History Department, Dean Richard Rosengarten of the Divinity School, and myself. From the library came Director Judith Nadler and Assistant Director James Vaughn, and from the Provost's office came Martha Roth, Associate Provost and Professor in the Oriental Institute in the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations. It was a small group, but diverse for all that. Covered the range from humanities to social and natural science. Its members used methodologies ranging from experiment to computation to surveys to archival work. It seems to have enthusiasts and skeptics for nearly any technology, policy, or plan, yet these are by no means the same from one issue to the next. Appointed in 2005, the task force was asked to report to the provost in March of 2006. The provost charged us, above all, to reimagine the libraries as research facilities. We were to figure out how best to use the libraries to further that part of the research enterprise that has traditionally relied on recorded material: books, periodicals, documents, ephemera, manuscripts, films, recordings, and the like. Beyond that, in typical University of Chicago style, the provost gave us no direction at all. The task force began data gathering at once, sponsoring a survey of library use among students that was administered on the web in the last month of the spring quarter. We've also conducted a variety of in-library observation studies of various things, from the use of faculty studies to levels of noise in various parts of the building. In the summer, we developed lists of colleagues who are heavy library users and began to contact them for one-on-one conversations. This fall, we've met with various individuals strongly interested in the library: Dean Saul Levmore of the law school, John Boyer of the college, and Steve Klass, the vice president for student affairs. We've also heard from such library staff as Alice Schreier, director of special collections. And some of us have also met with other individuals and groups relevant to our deliberations, with the Library Council, which brings together heads of the library's own working departments and some other staff, with the visiting committee of the library, and with Bernie Riley, the Center for Research Libraries, and so on. As part of this data gathering, it seemed to us useful to sponsor a public day of discussion and reflection about the library, which would be organized around presentations both from people involved in the local issue of Regenstein and from outsiders with a broader perspective that those of us immersed in the questions of Regenstein might not have. And that is the conference whose program you have before you. I hope you'll find the program interesting, indeed challenging, and very much look forward to your participation and response. Let me then take a minute to introduce Judith Nadler, director of the library. Judy Nadler has been a long-standing and central figure in the university library system. She came to the library in 1966 after studies at the University of Cluj in Romania and the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Her work in comparative literature made foreign language cataloging an obvious place to begin, but the administrative skills, so evident to all who meet her, carried her up through a sequence of posts: head of cataloging department, assistant director for technical services, and eventually associate director of the library, from which she became a natural choice for the director on Martin Runkel's retirement. Judy's worked very hard to organize today's conference, and it gives me great pleasure to ask her to say a few words of introduction. Judy.
Professor Abbott and I share a lot, have a lot in common, not height, however, and I will have to adjust this somehow. We have heard from Professor Abbott the context for today's conference. I will, because many here know a lot about the edition and others know little about it, I will try to find a happy medium and give some information that describe also the process, part of it repeating what Andy Abbott has already said. To set the context for the decision, over the past several years, the university has explored options for managing the library's growing print collections. For the foreseeable future, we expect both to make more digital resources available while also continuing to add substantial amount of print. The architectural firm of Shapley, Bulfinch, Richardson, and Abbott, a faculty committee, and library staff studied various alternatives to accommodate 25 years of growth for 3.5 million volumes, or the equivalent in linear feet. A range of options were considered, focusing on on-site versus off-site facility. Factors in the decision were browsability, timely access, initial and ongoing costs of project, and availability of space. After a prolonged process of consultation with faculty and careful evaluation of the programmatic needs, a recommendation was made to build an on-site, high-density, automated shelving system for the management of the library's print collections. $43 million were approved by the Board of Trustees in May 2005 for the facility and for processing required to realize the project. What are the goals of the project? To create growth space for 20 plus years, to facilitate interdisciplinary research, to preserve ready access to collections, to increase overall library functionality, and to safeguard flexibility of library space for future research. The addition is an extension from OpenStax to a high-density automated system. It has 4 programmatic areas: material storage, retrieval area, consultation area and research rooms, preservation and conservation lab. A few words about architect selection. The addition is envisioned to be to the immediate west of the existing Regenstein Library, which we are in today. Its prominent location at the crossroads of campus and its relationship with and connection to the iconic Walter Netsch SOM building makes this a high-profile project and a very exciting architectural challenge. An architect selection committee composed of university officers, trustees, faculty, and facility services has been working since May. Requests for qualification, RFQs, were sent to 28 national and international architectural firms. 21 firms responded to the RFQ. The committee reviewed the responses and selected 8 firms to receive the request for proposal, RFP. In September, a mandatory day-long pre-bid conference was hosted by the university to familiarize the firms with campus and the project. Based on the RFPs, 5 firms were invited back for a presentation. The committee expects to reach a selection decision in November and to submit its recommendation to the Board of Trustees in December. What are future milestones? January through August 2006, programmatic review, schematic design, and trustee approval. August 2006 to July 2007, design development, construction documents, trustees approval. August 27 through April 2009, construction. May, June 2009, loading of facility. July 2009, addition opens. Not just a space, an opportunity. And I cannot stress enough this statement. The biggest impact of the addition may be far beyond the expanded shelving capacity. The addition gives us the freedom to rethink existing library spaces and the flexibility to maximize the university library as a research tool in the coming decades. The architect will build the future library. The task force helps build the library of the future. Today's conference provides an important step in this process. And I thank the task force, and I thank Professor Abbott in helping us with this process. It's a wonderful, wonderful partnership. Thank you.